While living in Perth, I painted a number of large works of art, including portraits of people and their world, and took countless professional photographs. One day, a young lady visited me at my studio, telling me all about her brother Lee, who was good in drawing images and artistic illustrations, but was currently not going to school due to personal problems. Since he desperately needed to occupy himself and gain some work experience, she thought my studio could use his talents and give him a sense of worth, a sense of belonging. I was in need of an assistant apprentice, and so decided to give him a chance. I could train and start him in expressional painting and drawing his own works of art. In return, he could help me with the day-to-day running of the shop. But initially I was not going to pay him any wages. However, after a trial period, I would do so. His sister was very happy with the arrangement. The following week she was going to visit me again and hoped she could convince him to come with her. When Lee and his sister met me at the studio, I wondered whether I had understood her correctly about him, for they appeared to be like two sisters. He was extraordinarily gentle but shy, and one could immediately see why he had been constantly teased and bullied at school. Nevertheless, I elected to give him a chance to gain his confidence, to face the world courageously. We spoke for a while and discovered that they had a brother who was a skinhead and always in trouble with the police. The parents were not happy with each other either. Later he told me about his other hobbies such as writing poetry, drawing cartoons, and interest in olden stories of wizards and witches, legends, like the stories of King Arthur and the famed magician Merlin, as well as reading Tolkien stories. He had the tendency to correct my accent rather too often. It was annoying, but endurable. He continued to receive government benefits during this time. Content with the arrangement, he proved himself to be a very reliable young man. That alone was remarkable. However, he often kept away from his father and did not speak well of him. He was petrified of him because he apparently considered Lee as good for nothing, like his older brother, and no matter how hard he tried, he could never please his dad. In regard to his father, he said, Malcolm should be replaced with malfunction. I've seen him treat their mother badly, and so Lee developed unusual characteristics. For instance, he never took his old brown jacket off, and when questioned, he either shrugged his shoulders or declared that he did not want to be exposed. He called his closest friend the jacket as his protective cover. He was an intelligent and talented youngster, but it was evident how this 16-year-old's life had been badly affected, making him feel vulnerable. Among his school friends, he was wrongly judged, thus needing a lot of help. Hopefully, he felt valued and once again alive in the studio. At the end of the day, he never felt like going home, and often said the only thing keeping him there was his mother. A few times his sister and mother asked me where Lee was when he did not go home, wondering if he slept at my place, but that was never the case. Later I discovered to my surprise that he was wandering the streets at night. This sad case reminded me of my younger days. Occasionally he told me he wished I was his dad, and at times asked me in a very shy manner if he could sleep in the shop instead of going home to be shouted at or beaten. It seemed that he did not mind not getting paid for a while, receiving benefits instead, as long as his father thought he was living independently and not needing any parental support. According to what his mother and sister suggested, this way his father would not bother him. This again reminded me of my own youth. He continued spending valuable time in the studio, and whenever I needed to visit people, attend functions, and other engagements, he looked after the place. Although I had been drawing portraits of a number of girls, unusually, he never showed any interest in any of them. He was different and completely uninterested in the opposite sex. However, he had no particular interest in the same gender either. The usual belief is that when youngsters are not interested in the opposite gender, they may secretly be interested in their own sex. He was more interested in heroes, villains, and fantasy. Although living a very isolated and introvert manner, in his spirit he was an outgoing but happy to keep his own company person. One hoped he would come out of his shell soon, so that he could be happy with his life, leaving the past in the past. He needed direction to help him gradually accept himself and ever so gently come out of his cocoon. I could probably help him through the discipline of psychology, but I did not want to steer him into some form of dependency. I was not his parent. One day he came up with an unexpected scenario, telling me all about his dream of his mother being married to me, for he exclaimed that his mother and sister spoke very favorably about me. Later still, he gave me a hug, crying, and said he wished so much that I was his father. It was heart-wrenching to see a youth cry bitterly like this. He had a few other concerns. For example, he was convinced that he was the reincarnation of someone from the times of King Arthur and Merlin, the wise wizard. He also spoke of himself being the king at times, and felt I was probably the incarnation of Merlin, also believing he spent lifetimes in distant places, other worlds, claiming with some surety that I was also there. Shortly after, he began to write down his memories of aforetimes with constrained logic, describing his world of fantasy and the worlds he had been to. He even illustrated in pen and ink drawings what he vividly remembered. This seemed to be a world he needed to escape to, even if it was only imagined. It may have been a blend of what he once read, or things he had been told, or born in his rich imagination. I felt he needed direction to make his fantasy creation come to surface, probably in the form of literature and visual art, but he needed to be re-educated about the realism of the world he was born into. He also needed recognition and understanding from others around him. Some of his drawings were similar to the famous Escher's work, but he was not familiar with them at the time. Lee was indeed a very keen teenager, eager to learn the intricacies of art and try his own styles. In other words, he was mature beyond his age. By observation alone, one could clearly see why Lee wanted to turn his world upside down, but one could not guess how he wanted to achieve this. He adamantly kept declaring that he was so certain he had a past history going back to the times of King Arthur, insisting that I was the great wizard. It was also when strange thought patterns on his side started to stream, as he unexpectedly inquired, for example, about stories he had heard or read about where males expressed their feelings of love to each other. I asked him if he meant brotherly love or emotions like sons and fathers. He claimed he was talking about the intimate and romantic kind. Surprising and worrying me. This was going to be a little tough to deal with. I explained that I would like to see him happy with a lovely girlfriend, as it was during those olden days, and I could only consider him as if he was my son. He asked me if King Arthur and Merlin had any intimate relationship. Startled, I tried to explain calmly that I was not knowledgeable about it and did not believe they had any such closeness. He asked me further if they could have slept together, obliging me to explain that it was not my interest. But he adamantly continued to inquire if they had hugged and kissed each other, in a sense confusing me what to believe about his point of view. Obviously, he was indirectly trying to tell me about his innermost wishes and hopes. I explained that parents, indeed fathers and sons, would naturally hug each other. When he repeatedly told me how he wished I was his father, I could understand what he was missing, but it was not my desire to get too close to anybody. All of a sudden he jumped on me, hugging me, his eyes watering. He was shaking like a reindeer caught in the rain. I told him to calm down, but he could not control himself. I knew that he missed such closeness from his dad, but was frightened of him. He started begging me to forgive him, probably sensing he had upset me. I was only surprised. Needing to calm him down, I asked if he would like to join me for dinner. His eyes lit up as he asked me if I could love his mother. What a sad story. Unfortunately, I was going through my own storm and dust devils, and hoped I was not too harsh in my reaction. The situation needed to be treated very cautiously. He was trying to express his inner feelings, which had been suppressed for a long while and had obviously been very badly treated. And now, extremely confused, he was endeavoring to find which way he should go. I had a very strong feeling that deep down he wished that I would adopt him as my son. Knowing my own dilemmas, I thought about my beloved son Claude, whom I had not seen growing up, and the sadness I felt about my own state made me literally cry. I could indeed consider adopting a child, but it could present regrettable problems later. I decided to help Lee as much as I could, and hopefully encourage him to learn to live independently and courageously. I could be like a distant relative, looking after him. I was not prepared to engage myself in romantic interludes with anyone, although I felt strongly that he would love to see me befriended with his mother. Besides, I was occupying my mind with my own disillusions, while also trying to re-establish my own life, disassociating from my dark past, attempting to bury some of the ugly memories, and start everything anew was of utmost importance. I could easily conclude that was why I was engaged in conducting experiments, discovering facts and fallacies. Although I was not prepared for new romances with anyone, helping a young person in need within certain limits would not bother me, but intimate affair with his mother was unthinkable. He happily frequented my Victoria Park studio and shop on a daily basis, performing little tasks. I remember one amusing incident when a group of Commonwealth Bank officials came to visit me about what was happening with extraordinarily overdrawn amounts of money from Lee's savings account. Soon we discovered an unusual electronic glitch with the ATM machine just outside the shop on the main road. Lee apparently had drawn his fortnightly allowance, and after checking what was left in the account he found that the amount taken out was not registered. He thought he would try and withdraw the same amount as before. He drew it again, and the amount taken out was once again not registered. And so, just for the fun of it, he drew his money out several times over, totaling a huge sum. He then took it to his beloved mum to look after. His mother was not told what had really happened, and did some shopping with it. For the 16-year-old, it must have felt that he had hit the jackpot. But now, after it was discovered, the mother decided to repay it. The situation was certainly a sad one, but also very amusing. Lee thought that it must have been the great wizard playing a game with him. However, the bank employees told me that if his card was stolen and somebody else was helping himself, the money could never be recovered. Lee said perhaps he needed to lose his card, making a few people laugh. I was happy that the situation was resolved.